Good morning and welcome to Seattle Atheist Church. At Seattle Atheist Church, you will never hear anything supernatural preached from the podium. I will say our creed. At Seattle Atheist Church, we were founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We attempt to be excellent to all conscious beings, and we believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. If that sounds good to you, then you are probably in the right place. So the way we do it here is the members ourselves give the talks, and then we get into a circle and we discuss the talks afterwards. We have coming up the first Friday of the month, we're going to be having movie night. Unfortunately, I don't remember what the movie is. So, but if you would like to join us for movie night, please sign up online. That's how you get the invitation that actually gives you the information about where it is we're meeting. And it's in a nice little theater, but the seating is limited, so please sign up, okay?
The movie's listed online, isn't it?
And the movie is probably listed so you can find out what it actually is. It's just that I can't remember. I know one of the movies that's coming up is I Am Not Your Negro, but I think that one is in December. So I don't know what's in November.
Who chooses the movie?
We chose the movies when we at the planning meeting. Yeah. So and if you're not familiar, the way we plan things is we all get together and we think of what we want, and people sign up for talks, and we think about our extras and all that. And everyone is invited. So, all right, thanks very much. Eva's going to give a talk on cognitive entrenchment.
So I'm Eva Karlstrom. Oh, cool, there's some new faces. I'm talking today about cognitive entrenchment, which is when we get stuck in our particular beliefs or thoughts and can't get out of them for various reasons. There's a quote from Mark Twain that kind of embodies this. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know that just ain't so. And there's been a lot of research on cognitive entrenchment, and particularly on confirmation bias, which is an incredibly strong and well-established principle in psychology. It's the tendency to embrace information that supports your beliefs and to reject information that contradicts them. And we do that in a number of ways. At Stanford, they did an experiment with students who had different opinions on capital punishment. Some of them thought that it should be in place and was an effective deterrent, and some of them thought that it should not be in place and was not an effective deterrent. I don't know whether they excluded people who didn't fall into those two categories or if they just didn't find any. And then they were asked to respond to two different studies. Some of them were given a study that supported the deterrence argument, and some of them were given a study that called the deterrence effect into question. And both studies were actually completely made up. They didn't exist. They just provided them fake studies. And they'd been designed, the articles were designed to be equally compelling arguments. The students who originally supported capital punishment rated the pro-deterrence data very credible, and the anti-deterrence data not credible. And the students who'd originally opposed capital punishment did the reverse. So they trusted what met their existing presuppositions. And even after people are told that they've been presented with false information, the effect continues. Just because you've been told something is false does not actually make you go, wait a minute, I strengthened my belief in this because of this piece of information, but now I've found out I should throw out that piece of information. It doesn't actually make us undo the further conviction. We ratchet it up and we don't ratchet it back. There was another study where students were asked to do a task. I'm not going to go into specifically what the task was, it's kind of complicated. And then some of them were told they'd gotten the task mostly right. Some of them were told they'd gotten it mostly wrong. And then they were asked some more questions. And then they were told, oh, actually, we misled you. You were told a false score on that. The study is really about how you emotionally respond to being told your score. Knowing that what you were told earlier is false, how do you think you really did compared to the average student who did this task? The students who were given high scores thought they'd done well, and the students who were given low scores thought they'd done poorly. Even though they were told that piece of information was false, they still stuck by it without there being any relation to how well they'd actually done on the task. And more recently, in addition to the tendency to cling to our beliefs even when given other evidence, there is actually a backfire effect, which is strengthening your opinion, your entrenchment in your beliefs when given contrary evidence, which is really a paradoxical effect. There's a study out of Dartmouth from 2006 that was specifically about political beliefs. And they were having people read news articles that presented real quotes from President Bush, and then they either had a corrective statement after what he said that described how it was not the case, or that there wasn't evidence for the claim, or it didn't have that correction. And what they found was whether they sorted people by their ideology or their political party alignment, that aligned pretty closely. They got the same effects either way they counted people. When people were presented with a quote that met their beliefs they already had, and then a correction to it. I should back up a little bit and provide a little more context, actually. They did 3 different pieces on this. One of them was about weapons of mass destruction, one of them was about tax cuts, and one of them was about stem cell research. Subjects were shown an article that included a quote from President Bush that implied that Saddam Hussein had had weapons of mass destruction. That was not a well-founded claim. Lots and lots of people looked and did not find evidence, so best evidence is that he did not. But people who were right-wing believers generally believed that he had had weapons of mass destruction. So some of the articles had an explicit clarification saying, actually, there's no evidence that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Left-wingers and centrists who read the correction, their belief that Hussein had weapons of mass destruction dropped from 22% to 13%. So the ones who read Bush's statement but didn't get a correction, 22% believed his statement. Those who did read the correction dropped down to 13%. You kind of expect that. They go, oh, well, maybe we did. Oh, no, we didn't. Okay. Right-wingers who read the correction were more likely to believe that Bush had weapons of mass destruction than if they were not presented the correction. So 32% of the right-wing people in the study believed when they read the statement of Bush's that Bush was speaking correctly and Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. If they read the correction, it rose to 64%. It's not even that they dismissed the correction. It's not even just a matter of, oh, we can't trust the media. It's, if they're saying he didn't, then he must. Like, they're not even saying, I don't believe you. They're saying it must be not true because you said it. Interestingly, this did not statistically significantly vary based on the news source. Sometimes they listed the news source as being the New York Times and sometimes as Fox News. They didn't actually get a statistically significant difference in any of these studies which one it was. It may be that people didn't notice, or maybe there were other factors that swamped that effect. But anyway, that didn't make a difference. So they did some other pieces as well. They had very similar effects with a piece where they talked about tax cut debate. They had an article, they had a quote from Bush saying, let's see, the quote was, the tax relief stimulated economic vitality and growth, and it has helped increase revenues to the Treasury. So that was something that Bush said. And if you looked at the statistics at the time, it didn't actually meet what happened, nor did it meet well-accepted economic theory about trickle-down doesn't work. So when the correction was put in there, they got the same thing. They got a backfire effect. Conservatives, presented with evidence that tax cuts do not increase government revenues, ended up believing this claim more fervently than those who did not receive a correction. So this is really paradoxical. And it's not just right-wingers who do this. The third one was stem cell research. There was a statement that Senators Kerry and Edwards both made during the 2004 presidential campaign. They both said that Bush had banned stem cell research. What Bush actually did was limit federal funding of stem cell research to stem cell lines created before August 2001. And that didn't have any effect on privately funded stem cell research. So the truth was much more nuanced and not a blanket ban, as they were saying. But many liberals believed that he had made a complete ban, particularly since Senators Kerry and Edwards had said so. So similarly to the other two, there was a corrective paragraph in one version of the article, and there was not in the other version of the article, correcting the statement about President Bush's banned stem cell research. And here, the correction worked for right-wing and centrist subjects. The correction did not work for leftist subjects, but there wasn't a backfire effect. So the left-wingers did not go from he banned stem cell research to, oh wait, maybe he didn't. They went, or rather they did go to that. They didn't have a boomerang effect like the right-wingers had to the other two claims. So there may be differences in the context of the question, or there may be differences in how right-wing and left-wing people do epistemology, which would be my suspicion, but this study doesn't really get into those aspects. So this is a very human thing, both the confirmation bias and the potential for a backfire effect when your belief is challenged. There are things we can do to counter it, and in ourselves we want to be able to counter that so that we can be rational thinkers, and in others we want to counter that so that we can help them come to the right conclusions, which of course we assume are our own conclusions. So you need to work on both of these at once. One piece for countering cognitive entrenchment in yourself, actually there are a number of techniques. There's a website called Less Wrong by Eliezer Yudkowsky and the Center for Applied Rationality. And on that site there is a checklist of rationality habits, and some of them are specifically designed to get at the cognitive entrenchment effects. One of them is react to surprises. Notice that you're surprised by something. If you get some information that doesn't seem to match with your understanding of the world, flag that. Don't just go, what? That doesn't make sense. Go, that does not match how I thought that worked. I should investigate that. Figure out why it's different from your understanding, how it's different, and whether you need to restructure your understanding to allow for the new evidence, or maybe it's bad evidence, but you should check that. Don't just go, that doesn't match, it doesn't make sense, get rid of it. So flag them. Notice when your mind is arguing for a side rather than trying to find the truth. If you're trying to make a decision and you're trying to talk yourself into one side, notice that Stop. Try arguing for the other side. Or notice if your mind is flinching away from a thought. I don't really want to think about that. That's uncomfortable. That's probably something you should look at. Another piece on the checklist is question and analyze your own beliefs after they come to your attention. Notice if you're not being curious. That's kind of related to the earlier stuff too. If you're not being curious, you're shutting yourself off to surprises, to different evidence than you already have. Seek out the historical causes for your beliefs. Why do I think that? Did somebody tell me that? Did I read that somewhere? Was that a reliable source? Do I believe that because of experiences that I've had? Are they typical? Do other people I know have other experiences? Do people I don't know have other experiences? Think about how where your belief came from fits into the world as a whole and the evidence that might be out there. Here's another specific technique for questioning your own beliefs. If you're trying to decide between two hypotheses or more, and you have a piece of evidence that seems to point to one, think about the world in which one hypothesis holds, and think about the prior probability you would have assigned to that piece of evidence in that world. And then visualize the world where hypothesis 2 is true, and see if the evidence seems more likely or less likely in that world. So you want to actually think about it rigorously, not like, this piece of evidence seems consistent with what I assume is true, so I'll take it as evidence. Maybe it would be more likely in a different hypothesis. People don't often analyze that out. They just kind of go, yeah, this fits. It recognizes, it matches to what I think is true. We need to seek out counter evidence, and that is really against our instincts. Our brains are designed to go, is this true? Let me look for evidence it's true. Yeah, I see some evidence it's true. Okay, we'll run. We need to be going, if it weren't true, what would I expect to see? Have I looked for that? Have I looked for cases in which it's being true and it's not being true would be different? Go look for the evidence. Which way is it? Make predictions and test. That's science. And as far as trying to convince other people, this is harder because, convincing ourselves is really hard. Convincing other people is harder because they're not starting off saying, okay, I'm open to new ideas. If we're trying to change ourselves, we're trying to. So we're already there going, okay, how do I make sure that I'm being open-minded and rational? If you're going and talking to somebody else who has different beliefs from you and is saying them out loud to you and arguing with you, they're pretty much declaring the opposite. They're not saying, hey, I'm here for you to change my opinion. They're like, I'm here and I have this opinion and you're wrong. So lots of evidence, whether you're looking at studies or looking at the average comments section, lots of evidence is out there that just straight up arguing with people going, you're wrong, doesn't generally change minds. In fact, you usually get that backfire effect where people are like, now I know I'm wrong because I'm being persecuted, and wasn't Jesus persecuted, or Galileo was persecuted, or that's one of the effects that happens is people get argued against and they're like, see, I'm the victim and now I'm in the right and persecuted, so now I win. We get a lot of knots tied up. Some things that do work are getting people to explain their position more fully. We tend to have the impulse to want to shut people down when they're saying something that we really disagree with, like, look, I know that's false, just stop now. The problem is that when we interrupt people, it gets their backs up. And when we tell them they're wrong or stupid, we've now set ourselves on opposing sides. That word entrenchment, now you've set yourselves in different trenches in a war. So what works better, there was this study at Yale where graduate students were asked to rate their understanding of everyday devices like toilets or zippers. Mm-hmm. And we all use these things every day and we kind of go, oh yeah, I know how that works. But if you're actually asked to explain it, unless you're actually a plumber or an engineer or something, you probably don't really know how it works. You just kind of think you know how it works because you use it. Mickey, most people don't know how a toilet works.
Oh, okay.
Most people, a lot of people think they do. And then if you ask them to draw a picture, they get really lost. So they were asked to rate their understanding of everyday devices, and then they were asked to write detailed step-by-step explanations of how the devices work. And then after that, they were asked to rate their understandings again. After they tried to explain how these devices worked, they rated their knowledge lower, because they had had the experience of trying to describe it and realizing they had some gaps. If you give people space to explain how exactly the thing they're claiming is true works, they will often discover for themselves that there are gaps in their understanding. And if you know where there are some contradictions with facts that you guys do agree on, you can sometimes arrange it so that they come to that understanding themselves, which works way better than you pointing it out. If you can go, explain to me how exactly trickle-down works. Can you give me some examples of times when that's worked to improve the economy? People will, when you ask them for practical examples and facts, they will sometimes trickle off and go, well, maybe it's not that sure, I'm not really clear on the details. And even if they're not changing their position, it can weaken their position to the point where they may be more open to contrary facts in the future from you or from someone else, or that they discover on their own. You want to give people an out. Again, don't tell them they're stupid. That gets into Sun Tzu and the art of war. When people are in death ground and they have no alternative but to fight or die, they're going to fight hard. And our brains do think that admitting we're wrong is dying on a certain level. So don't put people in that position. Don't identify them with their opinions, and don't say you people are stupid, however much you might think it. So remember that you're not your beliefs, and let the person you're talking to not be their beliefs as well. Think about how the person you're talking to, how their experience has led them to the beliefs that they have, and what you have in common. Both beliefs that you have in common that you can kind of start with as solid ground and then see, okay, where do we deviate? And also experience that you have in common. Maybe you're both bowlers. Maybe you both have kids about the same age. Things like that seem irrelevant to opinions really change people's receptivity to different opinions. People who think they don't know anybody who's gay and then find out that someone they like and respect is gay shift their opinion of what gay people are like. That's one example that has proven pretty true. Pascal, actually, Blaise Pascal, who's a mathematician and philosopher, said, 350 years ago, he was saying, people are generally better persuaded by the reasons which they have themselves discovered than by those which have come into the mind of others. And that you should first point out the ways people are right, get them nodding with you, and reassure them that you are listening and that you understand their position before you start talking about the places where you disagree, and let them do their own construction. Basically, let people build their own evidence that maybe they're wrong. Don't shove it in their faces and insist they accept it. So basically, humans are goal-directed information processors. We're not content neutral. We're defending our own existing beliefs that we identify with ourselves, and we have that bias to reinforce our pre-existing views. So we need to be aware of those irrational tendencies and work to build a connection with the person we're talking to and give them an out, rather than making it unnecessarily confrontational, which will tend to build people's entrenchment and defenses. And I have sources for stuff if people want to look up the articles or the original Dartmouth study or anything. But that's basically it.